always trust everyone to be themselves, but trust in the fact that you can see them well. I mean, so it's like, you know, trust. It takes too much energy to not trust someone. You know what I mean? It takes too much energy. You always gotta stay 2 steps ahead of them or whatever. Right. But trust them to be them.
Right. To be themselves.
Trust the snake to bite you. Right. Trust the lion to laugh. Trust the thief to steal from you. Like, trust them to be them. Too. But know them when you see them.
Get your copy of Fire. It's definitely a must-read. If you enjoy hood books, this one is it. Just like the title of the book, it's officially Fire. Get it on Amazon, paperback or Kindle.
The once goal-driven, ambitious Sapphire turns to the street life after the sudden death of her big brother Dre. Dre's best friend Devontae tries to honor his homeboy's last request of looking out for his baby sister. A rebellious Sapphire makes it very difficult for Devontae to carry out his promise.
Let's go.
Peace. This is The Enemy's Public, and I am Bro.Nasir. This afternoon, first I want to wish everyone a very good afternoon. Hope you're enjoying yourself on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. The focal point today is Dr. Anthony Fauci, truth and lies about the C-19. I'm not going to tell it. I'm going to let them tell it because they don't want us to tell it. So I'm going to let those in government and Congress and the Senate, I'm going to let them tell it. I'm going to let them ask the questions, because if you lie about something, that means you know the truth. You can't lie unless you know the truth. And once you reveal that lie, it reveals the truth also. But before we get started, I'm going to allow some people to come in real quick. I'm going to play one song. I'm going to play one song, and then we're going to get to the subject matter. Share my screen real quick. Let's go.
Genius. Look. Nigga with attitude is back. Swag on 100 with an attitude to match. Heavy verse, your funeral. Eulogy of raps. Got niggas like damn, it's sad the way he had to do the track. Look. Everything I touch, I tend to body. Shout out to the young G's coming up behind me. The young me did a bid, paid his debt to society. Bunch of niggas slam, but a couple stay beside me. And my niggas still touching in that lobby. Hustling in the pack while they puffing on that lobby. Muscle in the back if you suckers wanna try me. Cause I done seen the scrap to the soul fucking high me. And I know this hit is still trying to lie me. So I guess I gotta melt niggas like pastrami. When I drop, they gon' shelf niggas, that's on mommies. Flex hit his verse, I guarantee he gon' bomb me. Cause they never seen a flow like this, like jail food. Bet you I'ma blow up quick. I'ma keep shooting even if I throw up bricks. Cause eventually it's gonna be a show enough switch. I'm a G and I ain't never had to throw up shit. Where I'm from, my young boys gotta grow up quick. Got the game on lock since I sold up zips. Just no tie gon' shine like a glow up stick. Damn. But first I gotta tie up all these loose ends. Hard times showed me to my true friends. I've been seeing life through a new lens. Just know my motivation is a new Benz. I told her she can hang, but that dude pins. I'm rolling with the gang, bring some cute friends. But don't you get no funny ideas, cause my cousin Samir always walk around with two twins. I call them shits T and Tamara. Empty the whole clip that's freeing up the barrel. Dinners with gold tips, I'm fleeing my apparel to get rich as a road trip, that's even if it's narrow. But I'm gon' ride till the wheels fall. These niggas ain't thorough, they just feel hard. Me, I call the shots like a drill sergeant. The plug got locked, but I'm still charged. Quarterback in the pack, I'm Cam Newton. Singing, I happen to rack my swag stupid. I've been doing this since I was a kid hooping. When you got it for this long, you can't lose it. When you got a team this strong, they can't move it. Niggas try to steal my style, but can't boost it. I'm just trying to feel my power, advance to it. It's just paper, Prezi, and Todd, my clan too lit. My clan too lit. Just paper, Prezi, and Todd, my clan too lit. Pixar, baby. Let's go. Look, and I don't give a damn if they shoot, cause they don't wanna see me when I start the plane in my group. These snakes creeping through my garden trying to land on my stoop, but the grass cut, guess you could say it's animal poop. While y'all was out getting high, mixing cram with the goose, I was serving this 85, mixing clam in the soup. I've been hanging in the trenches, I'm the man in the noose. If you a soldier, then why the fuck you abandon your troops? Niggas claiming they the realest, while I judge them by their dealings. It's been a little minute, but you fucking with the illest. The upside is crazy, you can play the villain. If I loosen up this tie, I'll be busting out the ceiling. But they don't even get it, shit went over their head. I'm feeling like a killer, plus I'm close to the edge. If you don't wanna be the reason why they toasting the dead, then let me eat, cause I'm the nigga that's supposed to get fed. When I still had a couple left, niggas still double checked and watch a nigga date, just to see if they in trouble yet. Been away for 8 and niggas still ain't start the bubble yet. Guess they in the way, my city waiting on another vet. And Todd don't mind being a savior. First I got some niggas to find, that's on my way up. My mother told me leave them alone, cause they ain't worth it. But I told her, Mom, my mind already made up. These niggas gotta feel it, yeah, I'm talking about my rap. Cause they been in my way like they was walking in my path. I hear these niggas talking about they talking out they ass. When niggas talking about Todd, that shit resulting in a blast. When I get off my shit, my niggas gotta love it. My city been going in and I'm a product of it. And after this, I better be the topic of discussion. Cause truth is you ain't gonna find out how the subject. I need that type of paper that the scholars touching. That type of daughter when you get it, you ain't got a budget. I need that type of paper that the scholars touching. That type of daughter when you get it, you ain't got a budget. Has it?
That's my nephew, Tahas the Genius, spitting them bars. But now we're going to get into the subject matter. Dr. A. Fauci, truth and lies about the C-19. We're going to let them tell it. With their line of questioning and their scrutiny, Anthony Fauci's been under a lot of scrutiny with his handling of the C-19. And let me punch up the videos real quick and we'll get into it. Bear with me. Got to get down to the bottom of what has happened and what's going on. After all what was said, you know, the lies and the truth is coming out. I can get on the YouTube or any social media platform and say the same exact thing that they're saying, yet because I'm saying it, it's considered misinformation. And I get charged with passing off information that is not consistent with what they want to tell us, even though they're telling us something that we already know. Yet let us get into it.
Conspiracy theories that weren't. 10 times that media, health officials, or our very own president were proven to have lied about the coronavirus pandemic.
They're really criticizing science because I represent science. That's dangerous.
Experts and health officials promised in March 2020 that we needed just 15 days to slow the spread. Now, almost 2 years later, we've seen almost 700 days of mandates, lockdowns, quarantines, shaming, hysteria, and travel restrictions with no stated end in sight. What do we have to look forward to? As of right now, more mandates.
Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
You're sure of it? Because people are listening really closely to this.
Right now, people should not be walking. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask.
During the early days of the
This is where he said we shouldn't be walking around with masks. Yet his direction changed not long after he said this.
Pandemic. The CDC recommended that Americans not wear face masks, and the US Surgeon General urged us to stop buying masks. But in April 2020, the CDC said that all Americans should wear face coverings to avoid transmission of the virus, sparking culture wars over mask mandates across the country, heavy shaming of those who chose not to wear masks, and viral videos of often violent confrontations between Americans. And that's not even touching the mask situation with children. Then, the CDC said in May that vaccinated Americans don't need to wear masks in almost
Especially those who were arrested for not wearing masks. And our young brother, Elijah McClain, who was accosted by the police for wearing a mask, even before all this COVID-19 stuff happened, he was wearing a mask and he was stopped, hit with a fatal dose of ketamine because somebody called the cops on him for wearing a mask. And shortly after that, we were mandated to wear masks.
almost any setting. And now, most media outlets are reporting that cloth
Peace
masks
to my
just
good
don't
brother,
work
Richard
and we should
Day.
try N95s.
I just want a yes, no.
And I
Was
was
it
trying.
this
I was trying
or was it
very
this?
hard. Look,
Which was it?
In December 2020, President-elect Joe Biden promised that he would not force Americans to be vaccinated.
No, I don't think it should be mandatory. I wouldn't demand to be mandatory, but I would do everything in my power, just like I don't think masks have to be made mandatory nationwide.
But this
And then he also changed his direction.
year, the Biden administration did exactly what Biden said they would not do and mandated that healthcare workers and U.S. companies with more than 100 employees must get vaccinated. The Supreme Court just blocked the Biden administration from enforcing the mandate on businesses and organizations. But healthcare workers who choose not to get vaccinated will still lose their jobs. And now that Americans are seeing that the vaccinations don't fully stop COVID, more and more questions are being asked about why Biden is mandating vaccines. Remember when we were all told that the coronavirus originated in a Chinese wet market? Republican Senator Tom Cotton was lambasted by the media for suggesting the coronavirus actually originated in an infectious disease lab rather than an animal market, as the Chinese government claimed. Snopes called Cotton's claims speculative, the BBC called them unfounded, and the Washington Post went so far as to say that the lab leak theory was debunked. After New York Magazine published an expose highlighting the legitimacy of the theory, many of those media outlets published stories confirming that yes, the coronavirus may have originated in a Wuhan lab. And now, we know that scientists consulting with the US government early in the pandemic believed that the coronavirus had originated in the lab. But Dr. Anthony Fauci worked to shut that hypothesis down.
The people who weaponize lies are killing people.
Activists, commentators, and teachers' unions argued throughout 2020 and 2021 that schools should close out of fear of spreading coronavirus cases from child to child and child to teacher. Though multiple studies suggested that COVID does not easily spread among children, and being in school settings doesn't create outbreaks. One commentator in an Atlantic piece suggested that school closures could result in flexible, adaptable, and resilient kids, sparking heavy backlash from conservatives. Now, after months and even years of children missing school, even the New York Times is publishing stories warning that closing schools would be a tragic mistake, recognizing that hospitalization and death is uncommon in children. We were repeatedly promised by Biden, Fauci, and many others that Americans who got vaccinated would not get the coronavirus.
You're okay. You're not going to get COVID if you have these vaccinations.
Now, as we see many vaccinated people continuing to get COVID, we know for a fact that this was not true. Vaccinated Americans can still get coronavirus, though their symptoms are usually less severe and they are less likely to die from the virus. As Fauci said in January, Omicron, with its extraordinary, unprecedented degree of efficiency of transmissibility, will ultimately find just about everyone. American women expressed concerns early on about how vaccines would affect their fertility, complaining on social media that their menstrual cycle had changed since getting the vaccine. Media and health officials repeatedly assured the public that there was no evidence to suggest COVID vaccines negatively affect fertility, until January 2022, when a new study found that women had an average menstrual cycle length of about 1 day longer than usual after getting vaccinated. Health officials say the change is small and temporary, noting that plenty of vaccinated women have gotten pregnant. But women have criticized media dismissals of their concerns, saying they deserve real answers from medical professionals about how the vaccine affects their fertility. We were promised that vaccinations would end COVID and that Americans would no longer have to mask after they got the vaccine. But the CDC changed its mask guidance when it found in July 2021 that vaccinated people could still get the COVID Delta variant. And across the
If you don't know something, you should say it, especially when it's something new that the people are not accustomed to. Saying it prematurely is very irresponsible.
the country, leftist politicians like DC Mayor Muriel Bowser continue to mandate masks for indoor businesses and events.
Our approach has always been to dial up our interventions as the virus dictates.
Fauci has repeatedly denied that agencies under his direction engaged in gain-of-function research in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Media called pushback on this claim from people like Senator Rand Paul misinformation. But a high-ranking National Institutes of Health officer admitted in an October letter that the Wuhan Institute of Virology had failed to immediately notify that it had engaged in what sure looks a lot like gain-of-function research, creating a lab-generated chimeric coronavirus between June 2018 and May 2019 that tested more deadly on mice with humanized cells than the natural virus it was made from.
This paper that you were referring to was judged by qualified staff up and down the chain as not being gain of function. Let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans.
Right.
You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah.
Biden and Fauci have repeatedly blamed
Sound like gain of function to me. If it's put in the order that they said, sounds like gain of function to me.
the unvaccinated for propagating outbreaks of the coronavirus Delta and Omicron variants. As recently as January 13th, Biden said that this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated, but the president and health officials who continue to cite breakthrough cases are either forgetting or ignoring the many, many vaccinated Americans who have contracted COVID as of late.
This is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. And I mean by this, right now, both vaccinated and unvaccinated people are tested.
How would they be able to give that information? How would they be able to tell? And also, how would they be able to tell if our people is disproportionately affected by something that's new? I don't understand that. Never understood that. And they had silly Negroes who are in entertainment repeating this narrative.
Testing positive.
We now know that we have been lied to by the very people that claim to be protecting us, and we have been lied to repeatedly.
Now we're going to go into Ron Paul confronting Fauci about the C-19.
But she's had the flu for 14 days. Should she get a flu shot?
Well, no. If she got the flu for 14 days, she's as protected as anybody can be, because the best vaccination is to get infected yourself.
And
so if she really has the flu.
Now, this is footage of some earlier footage that Dr. Fauci was saying about the flu. What he's saying is, if you catch it, that's the best protection from it. And watch how Ron Paul handled this with his questioning.
If she really has the flu, she definitely doesn't need a flu vaccine. If she really has the flu,
she should not get it again.
No, she doesn't need it, because it's the most potent vaccination is getting infected yourself.
This is an ongoing question, and we've had ever-evolving opinions from you, Dr. Fauci. Currently, antibody surveys show that 80% of children, approximately 80% of children, have had COVID, and yet there are no guidelines coming from you or anybody in the government to take into account their naturally acquired immunity. You seemed quite certain of yourself in 2004, but in 2022, there's a lot less certainty. One of the things that we also know after looking at this for 2 to 3 years is that the mortality from COVID is very similar, if not less, than influenza. So when we look at this, we wonder, why you seem to really embrace basic immunology back in 2004 and why you seem to reject it now.
Well, I don't reject basic immunology, Senator, and I have never denied that there is importance of the protection following infection. However, as we have said many times, and as has been validated by the authorization by the FDA through their committee and the recommendation by the CDC through their committee, that a vaccination following infection gives an added extra boost. And that film that you showed is really taken out of context. I believe that was when someone called in who had had a reaction to a vaccine and asked me through a telephone in the interview if they should get vaccinated again. So it was in the context of someone who had a reaction. And as a matter of fact, Reuters fact check looked at that and said, Fauci's 2004 comments do not contradict his pandemic stance.
Actually, words don't lie. If you look at the words behind me, we can go over them a little bit at a time. She doesn't need it because the most potent vaccination is getting infected yourself.
It is true. It is true, Senator. It is a
Regardless if it's 2016 or it's today, that's the answer that Anthony Fauci gave. That's the answer he gave to the question.
very potent way to protect.
So when you're trying to tell us that kids need a third or a fourth vaccine, are you including the variability or the variable of previous infection in the studies? No, you're not. Because when you have approved vaccines in recent times, and the committees that have approved it for children don't report anything on hospitalization or death or transmission. They only report that if you give them the jab, they'll make antibodies. And you can
salute to my good brother
hundreds of
Hawkeye.
jabs,
Salute.
they'll make antibodies every time, but that does not prove efficacy. So what you're doing is denying the very fundamental premise of immunology that previous infection does provide some sort of immunity. It's not in any of your studies. Almost none of your studies from the CDC or from the government have the variable of whether or not you've been previously infected. So let's look at adults. I've had 3 infections. Should I get a 4th one? If you're going to measure whether I get a 4th one, you need a category that has a 4th one in it, and you need one that has nothing in it, no vaccine or the 4th vaccine. But you also need to know whether they've been infected. If you ignore whether they've been infected, you're ignoring a vaccine, basically. So you're ignoring a variable. So what you're giving us is you decry, and people decry vaccine hesitancy. It's coming from the gobbledygook that you give us. You're not paying attention to the science. The very basic science is that previous infection provides a level of immunity. If you ignore that in your studies, if you don't present that in your committees, you're not being truthful or honest with us.
Senator, if I might respond, I have never, ever denied fundamental immunology. In fact, I wrote the chapter in the textbook of medicine
Is it any
on
of the
fundamental
any of the guidelines?
immunology.
Any of the guidelines for vaccines?
You know,
do any of the guidelines for vaccines from the government include previous infection as something to base your decision making on with vaccines? Do any of the guidelines involve previous infection? That's why you're ignoring previous infection, because it doesn't involve any of the guidelines. And furthermore, we've been asking you, and you refuse to answer whether anybody on the vaccine committees gets royalties from the pharmaceutical companies. I asked you last time, and what was your response? We don't have to tell you.
Right.
We've demanded that
Good question. Good question.
them through Freedom of Information Act. And what have you said? We're not going to tell you. But I tell
The Freedom of Information Act, a FOIA request requires anything that's public record. Any one of us can go get it, and they denied it. 2 people in government.
tell you this, when we get in charge, we're going to change the rules, and you will have to divulge where you get your royalties from what companies. And if anybody in the committee has a conflict of interest, we're going to learn about it. I promise you that.
Mr. Chair, can I respond to that, please?
Right.
Okay, there are two aspects for what you said. You keep saying you approve, you do this, you do that. The committees that give the approval are FDA through their advisory committee. The committees that recommend are CDC through their advisory committee. And you keep saying, I'm the one that's approving a vaccine based on certain data. So I don't really understand, with all due respect, Senator.
You're the
and I
one
have-
that said you would not
No.
reveal, what companies gave you royalties, or what company gave the other scientists royalties.
Gotta move
That's
on.
what you told the committee.
Senator Paul,
Sir,
you gotta move on.
Could I please answer that?
Briefly,
You
yes.
keep asking committees. They're not my committees. They're the VRPAC committee for the FDA and the ACIP for the CDC. So I don't have any idea what goes on
And they
with
won't
the.
reveal, as well as you won't reveal.
Okay,
what
we're gonna
companies you got.
move on. We're over time. Senator Paul, you're over.
I'm going to move on to another clash with Ron Paul and Anthony Fauci.
Dr. Fauci, I don't expect you today to admit that you approved of NIH funding for gain-of-function research in Wuhan, but your repeated denials have worn thin, and a majority of Americans, frankly, don't believe you. Even the NIH now admits that EcoHealth Alliance did perform experiments in Wuhan that created viruses not found in nature that actually did gain in lethality. The facts are clear. The NIH did fund gain-of-function research in Wuhan, despite your protestations. You can deny it all you want, but even the Chinese authors of the paper, in their paper, admit that viruses not found in nature were created, and yes, they gained in infectivity. Your persistent denials, though, are not simply a stain on your reputation, but are a clear and present danger to the country and to the world. As Professor Kevin Esfelt of MIT has written, gain-of-function research looks like a gamble that civilization can't afford to risk. And yet here we are again, with you steadfast in your denials. Why does it matter? Because gain-of-function research with laboratory-created viruses not found in nature could cause a pandemic even worse the next time. We're suffering today from one that has a mortality of approximately 1%. They're experimenting with viruses that have mortalities of between 15 and 50%. Yes, our civilization could be at risk from one of these viruses.
Gain-of-function research is a gamble that civilization can't afford to risk. Why would anybody experiment with viruses? That's to me, that's just straight up mad scientist.
Viruses. Experiments that combine unknown viruses with known pandemic-causing viruses are incredibly risky. Experiments that combine unknown viruses with coronaviruses that have as much as 50% mortality could endanger civilization as we know it. And here you sit, unwilling to accept any responsibility for the current pandemic and unwilling to take any steps to prevent gain-of-function research from possibly unleashing an even more deadly virus. You mislead the public by saying that the published viruses could not be COVID. Well, exactly no one is alleging that. No one is alleging that the published viruses by the Chinese are COVID. What we are saying is that this was risky type of research, gain-of-function research. It was risky to share this with the Chinese, and that COVID may have been created from a not yet revealed virus. We don't anticipate the Chinese are going to reveal the virus if it came from their lab. You know that, but you continue to mislead. You continue to support NIH money going to Wuhan. You continue to say you trust the Chinese scientist. You appear to have learned nothing from this pandemic. Will you today finally take some responsibility for funding gain-of-function research in Wuhan?
Senator, with all due respect, I disagree with so many of the things that you've said. First of all, gain of function is a very nebulous term. We have spent, not us, but outside bodies, a considerable amount of effort to give a more precise definition to the type of research that is of concern that might lead to a dangerous situation. You are aware of that. that is called P3CO.
We're aware that you deleted gain of function from the NIH
Well-
website.
Well, I can get back to that in a moment if we have time, but let's get back to the operating framework and guide rails of which we operate under. And you have ignored them. The guidelines are very, very clear that you have to be dealing with a pathogen that clearly is shown and very likely to be highly transmissible in an uncontrollable way in humans and to have a high degree of morbidity and mortality, and that you do experiments to enhance that, hence the word EPPP, enhanced pathogens of
So when
potential
EcoHealth
pandemic.
Alliance took the
Now,
virus
well, can I would love to finish.
SHC014 and combined it with WIV1 and caused a recombinant virus that doesn't exist in nature, and it made mice sicker, mice that had humanized cells, you're saying that that's not gain of function research?
According to the framework and guidelines.
So what you're
of
doing is
P3
defining away gain of function.
No.
You're simply saying it doesn't exist because you changed the definition on the NIH website. This is terrible, and you're completely trying to escape
Right.
the idea that we should do something about trying to prevent a pandemic from leaking from a lab. There's the preponderance of evidence now points towards this coming from the lab, and what you've done is change the definition
Right.
on your website to try to cover your ass, basically. That's what you've done. You've changed the website to try to have a new definition that doesn't include the risky research that's going on. Until you admit that it's risky, we're not going to get anywhere. You have to admit that this research was risky. The NIH has now rebuked them. Your own agency has rebuked them. But the thing is you're still unwilling to admit that they gained in function when they say they became sicker. They gained in lethality. It's a new virus. That's not gain of function.
According to the definition that is currently operable, Senator, let's make it clear for the people who are listening. The current definition was done over a 2 to 3 year period by outside bodies, including the NSABB, 2 conferences by the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine on December 2014, March 2016. We commissioned external risk-benefit assessment, and then on January of 2017, the Office of Science and Technology Policy of the
They changed the definition to fit the narrative. Go ahead on and say it, Dr. Fauci.
White House issued the current policy.
And coincidentally,
I have not
the
changed
definition
any
appeared
definition.
on the same day the NIH said that yes, there was a gain of function in Wuhan. The same day the definition appeared, the new definition, to try to define away what's going on in Wuhan. Until you accept it, until you accept responsibility, we're not going to get anywhere close to trying to prevent another lab leak of this dangerous sort of experiment. You won't admit that it's dangerous, and for that lack of judgment, I think it's time that you resign.
Thank you, Senator Paul. And I would like to give the time to Dr. Fauci.
Yeah, well, there were so many things that are egregious misrepresentation here, Madam Chair, that I don't think I'd be able to refute all of them, but just a couple of them for the listeners to hear for. You have said that I am unwilling to take any responsibility for the current pandemic. I have no responsibility for the current pandemic. The current pandemic, okay? Number 2, you said the overwhelming amount of evidence indicates that's a lab leak. I believe most card-carrying viral phylogenists and molecular virologists would disagree with you that is much more likely, even though we leave open all possibilities, it's much more likely that this was a natural occurrence. Third, you say
We've tested 80,000 animals and no animals have been found with COVID.
Senator Paul, the time is for.
And
Dr. Fauci to
third,
respond.
you made a statement just a moment ago that's completely incorrect, where you say we continue to support research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
You proved it in
which is
August of last
completely-
year.
No, your statement says, quote, I wrote it down as you were writing. You continue to support research at the Wuhan Institute of
You were in
Virology.
committee a month ago and
Which
said
is
you still
completely-
trust the Chinese scientists and you still support the research over there. You said it a month ago in
Senator
committee.
Paul, I have allowed Dr. Fauci to respond. You've had your time. I'm going to give him.
He's going to
one
be
more minute.
dishonest. He ought to be challenged.
Senator Paul, we will allow Dr. Fauci to respond after you've given accusations like that. Dr. Fauci.
Well, I don't have any more to say except to say that, as usual, and I have a great deal of respect for this body of the Senate, and it makes.
Going to move on to, do you think that Dr. Fauci intentionally lied under oath? That's the question that's being asked.
I now recognize Ms. Maliotakis from New York for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Chairman. For 2 years, myself and the other Republicans on this subcommittee connected the dots. We exposed the evidence supporting our strong belief that COVID was developed and leaked from the Wuhan lab. And during those same 2 years, the same Democrats that sit on this committee, they only hindered, they obstructed, they refused to hold hearings and get to the truth. Now we see mounting evidence supporting the COVID-19 originated from the lab in Wuhan, China, run by the Communist Chinese Party. And this hearing is about getting to the truth. I thank the chairman for making this the very first hearing, because the American people who have seen just as many fellow Americans die from COVID, as nearly as many die from COVID, that died in every war since the American Revolution combined, deserve to know the truth. Dr. Redfield, you pointed to the lab leak theory even before we did. In mid-January of 2020, you expressed concerns to Dr. Fauci, to Jeremy Farrar of UK's Wellcome Trust, and to Dr. Tedros of World Health Organization that, quote, we had to take the lab leak hypothesis with extreme seriousness. And you urged Dr. Fauci to investigate both the lab and the natural hypotheses. Shortly thereafter, on February 1st, Farrar convened a meeting of a group of 11 top scientists across 5 time zones and asked Dr. Fauci to join. And he wrote, quote, my preference is to keep this group really tight. Obviously, ask everyone to treat in total confidence, unquote. Dr. Redfield, you were excluded from this call, but up until then, you had been on every single, you were included in every other conversation. What changed? Why do you think that you were excluded from these conversations?
Thank you very much. I think just to emphasize, in early to mid-January, I did have multiple calls with Fauci, Farrar, and Tedros about how important I thought it was that science get engaged in aggressively pursuing both hypotheses. I also expressed as a clinical virologist that I felt it was not scientifically plausible that this virus went from a bat to humans and became one of the most infectious viruses we have for humans. All viruses are not the same. So when you look at coronaviruses for SARS and MERS, for example, when they entered the human species, which they did via an intermediate, they never learned how to go human to human. Even to this day, they don't know how to go human to human. So you can't equate Ebola with a coronavirus.
Now, why do you think you were excluded from those calls?
Because it was told to me that they wanted a single narrative and that I obviously had a different point of view.
Okay. In emails following the conference call, 4 of the 11 scientists told Fauci that they all found the genetic sequence inconsistent with expectations from evolutionary theory, basically what you're saying. However, just 3 days later, these 4 scientists had drafted a paper arguing the exact opposite, and that's now.
The question is, how does it spread if it's not able to go from human to human? I don't understand that. How does it spread then?
The infamous proximal origin of SARS-CoV-2. Our investigations show that this paper was prompted by Dr. Fauci, among others, with a goal to disprove the lab leak theory. What is the likelihood that these scientists came across additional information just 3 days after making these statements to conclude with such certainty that COVID-19 came from nature instead of the lab leak that they thought it was 3 days earlier?
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate. Again, I've said this before, that this whole approach that was taken on February 1st and subsequently in the month of February, if you really want to be truthful, it's antithetical to science.
Thank you.
Science has debate, and they squashed any debate.
Thank you. Given what we know now and looking at all the conversations in February of 2020 and before the release of the paper, do you think that Dr. Fauci used this paper to hide the gain-of-function research created this virus?
I can't talk about Fauci's motivation.
Do you think that the paper does hide the truth?
I think it's an inaccurate paper that basically was part of a narrative that they were creating. Remember, this pandemic did not start in January at the seafood market. We now know there was infections all the way back into September. This was a narrative that was decided that they were going to say this came from the wet market, and they were going to do everything they could to support it, to negate any discussion about the possibility that this came from a laboratory.
I got 20 seconds left. Dr. Fauci was affirmatively told in an email that NIAID had a monetary relationship with the Wuhan Institute through EcoHealth Alliance. He was told this in January 27th of 2020. Do you think that Dr. Fauci intentionally lied under oath to Senator Paul when he vehemently denied NIH's funding of gain-of-function research?
I think there's no doubt that NIH was funding gain-of-function research.
Is it likely that American tax dollars funded the gain-of-function research?
So this man just stated that Dr. Fauci lied. That's what he just stated, that he lied, that they were doing gain-of-function research.
That created this virus?
I think it did, not only from NIH, but from the State Department, USAID, and from DOD.
I'm out of time. Thank you very much.
Now, we're going to go to Rich McCormick grilling Fauci and calling it
I
ideological
recognize
bullshit.
Dr. McCormick for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Dr. Wenstrup, Chairman. It's been insinuated that politicians, only bloggers, only conspiracy theorists are disagreeing with you. I want to point out that I'm probably the only member of Congress that actually treated patients during the pandemic from the very beginning to the very end of the pandemic, during night shifts in the ER. Thousands of patients during that time. And in 2020, I was censored. My medical license was threatened because I disagreed with bureaucrats. Literally taken off the internet as a person who is treating patients with leading edge technologies, developing theories, but doing my very best, but being censored by the United States government for the first time, stepping in and taking the place of medical professionals as the experts in healthcare. Any dissent surrounding COVID-19 treatments, mask mandates, and any public policy surrounding the pandemic was immediately labeled as anti-science. I watched as public health officials and politicians told my patients what treatment options were best for them, regardless of their comorbidities or their medical history. Despite my education and my training and my experience, my opinions were relegated to conspiracy and misinformation by so-called healthcare experts,
which I deem impossible. You know, if you agree with what's going on, the narrative that they're trying to set, they don't have a problem with you, but they have healthcare experts who disagree, and they're being silenced and censored. That's what we're dealing with.
who had never treated a patient throughout the entire pandemic. This has been a black eye on the medicine and has highlighted why government should never insert itself in between patients and their healthcare providers. The American people deserve to make medical decisions through conversations with their physicians rather than politically motivated mandates. Dr. Fauci, did you ever treat a patient for COVID during the pandemic?
I was part of a team that was at the NIH that took care. We didn't take care of many of them.
Okay, so not hands-on. Got it. Thank you. Why would I be criticized by a bureaucrat for doing my very best as a healthcare? This is a rhetorical question. But why? Why would the government, who's never treated a patient for COVID, you can read all the things you want, but you're not there. You're not seeing patients. You're not watching people die, intubating patients right there with that disease in your face, watching it happen, watching the development of this disease and actually learning from it. But I'm being told by bureaucrats what's right and wrong. And what's funny is everything I was censored on, I was proven to be right. Pretty crazy, isn't it? You said in an interview that you gave as part of an audiobook written by Michael Spector that you believed an institutional should make it hard for people to live their lives so they'd feel pressured to get vaccinated. Could we run the audio clip on that, please?
You think can be done about it. I have to say that I don't see a big solution other than some sort of mandatory vaccination. I know federal officials don't like to use that term.
Once people feel empowered and protected legally, you were going to have schools
universities and colleges are going to say, you want to come to this college, buddy? You're going to get vaccinated. Lady, you're going to get vaccinated. Yeah. Big corporations like Amazon and Facebook and all of those others are going to say, you want to work for us, you get vaccinated. And it's been proven that when you make it difficult for people in their lives, they lose their ideological bullshit and they get vaccinated.
Thank you. Are all objections?
That is utter insanity. People have to chance and they got to choose between their livelihood and their life. That's what the people had to choose from.
Objections to COVID vaccinations, ideological bullshit, Dr. Fauci?
No, they're not, and
Thank
that's
you.
not what I was referring to.
Well, in reference to making it hard for people to get education, traveling, working, I'd say it very much was in context.
Yes.
And I take great offense to this. Miss Allison Williams testified before this committee about losing her job because she sought an exemption for ESPN's vaccine mandate, which came from recommendations from bureaucrats like yourself. She and her husband were actively working with a fertility expert, a physician, on how to get pregnant, and agreed with the premise that she was young, healthy, wanted to get pregnant, and shouldn't get the vaccination for medical purposes. But she was fired because you made it hard, just like you said in your statement, because you didn't want to make sure that the ideological bullshit got in the way of her working,
Salute.
of living her life, of making a medical decision with her healthcare professional. I think America should take great offense to this. That's exactly what you meant when you said making it hard for people to live without getting a vaccination. You affected people's ability, well,
Let me run
in
that
reference
back.
to making it hard for people to get education, traveling, working. I'd say it very much was in context.
I'm gonna run that back.
Get vaccinated.
Thank you. Are all objections to COVID?
Like Amazon and Facebook and all of those other universities and colleges are going to say, you want to come to this college, buddy? You're going to get vaccinated. Lady, you're going to get vaccinated. Yeah. Big corporations like Amazon and Facebook and all of those others are going to say, you want to work for us, you get vaccinated. And it's been proven that when you make it difficult for people in their lives, they lose their ideological bullshit and they get vaccinated.
Thank you.
Damn shame.
Are all objections to COVID vaccinations ideological bullshit, Dr. Fauci?
No, they're not, and
Thank
that's
you.
not what I was referring to.
Well, in reference to making it hard for people to get education, traveling, working, I'd say it very much was in context. And I take great offense to this. Miss Allison Williams testified before this committee about losing her job because she sought an exemption for ESPN's vaccine mandate, which came from recommendations from bureaucrats like yourself. She and her husband were actively working with a fertility expert, a physician, on how to get pregnant, and agreed with the premise that she was young, healthy, wanted to get pregnant, and shouldn't get the vaccination for medical purposes. But she was fired because you made it hard, just like you said in your statement, because you didn't want to make sure that the ideological bullshit got in the way of her working, of living her life, of making a medical decision with her healthcare professional. I think America should take great offense to this. That's exactly what you meant when you said making it hard for people to live without getting a vaccination. You affected people's ability to work, travel, be educated, to actually flourish in American society, to self-determine, as we're all given God-given rights. Shame on you. Dr. Fauci, you've become Dr. Fear. Americans do not hate science. I don't hate science. The American people hate having their freedoms taken from them. You inspired and created fear through mask mandates, school closures, vaccine mandates that have destroyed the American people's trust in our public health institutions. This fear you created will continue to have ripple effects over generations to come. You have already seen its effects in education, in the economy, and everything else. Quite frankly, you said, if you disagree with me, you disagree with science. Dr. Fauci, I disagree with you because I disagree with fear. And with that, I yield.
Now we're going to move on to someone who worked, with
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
bit
Is
more
this correct
rings.
that this was your title?
It says, so you're lying then, but you're giving us the truth now. He got cornered, the Fauci aide, with his own email that he sent. See, that data footprint don't lie. Even if you erase it, they got IT techs that can get your email that you thought you erased just with the data footprint.
The senior advisor to National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, former director, Dr. Anthony Fauci.
I think my title is Senior Advisor to the Director, National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases.
Okay. And how long did you work with Dr. Fauci or for him?
26 years.
And you'd also consider him a personal friend?
No, I mean,
No?
he's a colleague, and Tony
Okay.
is a very, private guy. He doesn't have a lot of, I've never gone out with him to have a beer.
Now, you mentioned Peter Daszak is a personal friend
Yes.
for 20 years. Is that correct?
Probably a little less than 20 years, but somewhere in that range.
Okay. And your statement today still is that you did not intend to avoid FOIA,
Yes, sir.
in spite of the several emails we have saying otherwise. Is that correct?
I think it's correct, but I'm not, there's some elements of this, that I don't think are being understood.
And you
can't
just said
avoid
that you did
FOIA.
no official business on your Gmail account. Is that correct?
I tried to make sure I never did official business.
And that's not what you just said a few minutes ago. You said you never did. You said the purpose of this was for personal. Here's an email from Peter to you. Attached is a single sheet with bullets explaining why Dr. Tabak was wrong and hopefully convincing folks at NIH to stop criticizing EHA's reporting compliance. Please don't share this letter yet. We'll edit that and get it to NIH by Tuesday, hopefully. You replied, Peter, this is an excellent draft. I will suggest some wordsmithing tweets later today. He said, thanks for the comments, David. I'll incorporate them today. Do you think that's not official business?
I'd have to look at it. I don't know.
Okay, this is related EHA's Echo Health. Is that right?
Yeah, but I mean, yes.
Okay, so this is an organization who got a government grant that you're supposed to be overseeing, right?
I don't have any grant oversight.
Well, NIH.
NIH does, but I'm
sure, and you are the senior advisor to the head of.
Right, but I have no involvement in.
He made sure the man got his title right, but now he want to backpedal of his functionality to that title.
Any grants in any aspect of any grants.
Sure.
And I don't know whether what you're referring to is a grant that was already funded or an application that a friend.
Do you not see that it's a conflict of interest for you to be advising someone who's working to get a federal grant on how they're communicating and approaching and even suggesting tweet revisions?
I think it would be a conflict of interest, as I understand it. Helping somebody.
Is that why you used your Gmail instead of your official mail for communication with Peter?
Poly is many, and they are bloodsuckers of the poor. That is what a politician is.
Well, using my Gmail was for a different purpose. That was for avoiding more embarrassment and danger to him.
And specifically, as your emails say, avoiding FOIA, correct?
No, well, yeah, I guess you could say that. Avoiding him sending something that had nothing to do with NIH business, but could be FOIA and embarrass him.
Okay, now there's been this dialogue that, you're the one bad apple in a whole bunch. Before, our last hearing, the communication was Peter was the one bad apple out of a whole bunch. Who was the FOIA lady that you mentioned?
I think Marg Moore.
Right.
Marg is in Margaret.
Okay, what instructions, what tips did she give you about avoiding FOIA?
Well, she gave me none about avoiding FOIA. That was a joke. But what she did say to me was, let me back up a little bit.
You sure about that?
Hmm?
Are you sure about that? We can subpoena her email too, We can, and we can call her to witness as well. So
Yeah,
make
okay.
sure your
Well,
testimony is
I'm
accurate.
telling you what I know and remember, and it's the truth as far as I know it. When Peter had.
Do you think you're the first employee that she gave advice on how to avoid FOIA?
She didn't give me advice about how to avoid FOIA. Let me
You
finish.
said she gave you advice on how to avoid.
That's what I said, because I was sort of.
So you were like,
They do this all the time on many levels. You try to go get paperwork for something that happened that you want proof. You want to, sometimes most case scenario, you want to prove yourself innocent. So you go to the clerk's office, or you may go to the city clerk's office, or you may go to wherever they do in your municipality that gives you the Freedom of Information Act, public records, and they try to deny you. They always cover up something.
you were lying then, but you're telling us the truth now.
I wasn't lying. I was making a joke with Peter. I said something like, I have a way to make it go away, but that was just a euphemism. May I tell you what she told me?
Sure.
I was worried because I was getting so many FOIAs. I was worried that personal things were going to get into it. So I went and talked to her and says, how does this work? Because at that point in time, I had no involvement in FOIAs. What happened, if I was going to be FOIA'd, the FOIA office would notify me and say, do we have your permission to do a FOIA investigation? And I'd say yes, and that's the end of what I heard. But I was worried that these personal things would get caught up in it. So I asked her how it worked. And she said, well, you really don't have to worry about personal things, because when there's a FOIA request, we, the FOIA office, negotiate to limit the scope of what they're looking for to, among other things, make sure that inadvertent stuff doesn't get in there.
You said a comment earlier that concerned me. The relationship between your organization, NIH, and Echo Health should be one of oversight. And you said, to start off this hearing, you said, we all felt it was our job to cheer Peter up. I'm just really concerned because Peter even admitted the last time that he did not do a good job of overseeing the grant that went to the Wuhan lab. It's clear that our government did not do a good job of overseeing Echo Health. And it, to me, speaks to the culture that is at issue here when you think your job, instead of oversight, is to make sure that we're cheering up the people we should be overseeing. Thank you, Chairman. I yield back.
Now, he's going to be asked, why didn't he report it to
it doesn't automatically
the ethics office by Infumi? He grills the top aide now.
over to another email.
I'm sorry,
I now recognize Mr. Mfume from Maryland for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you and the ranking member. I mean, if this were not laughable, it would be laughable. I don't know what I'm watching. I saw some of this in my office and got here a little while ago and caught the rest of it. Mr. Warrens, this is a tale out of some sort of movie, and I'm not trying to particularly characterize you, except that I can't define you. I mean, you seem to be here, there, and everywhere on these questions, and I'm trying to get what your testimony is here to this body, other than, I don't know.
When someone lies so much, they actually forget about the lies they told. They can't keep it together. The truth is final. You don't have to lie no more. So he been lying so much, he forgot about him.
I don't remember. I'm not sure. Much of your personal email account exchanges have been revealed, as we all know, by media outlets across the country in recent months, and many more have been turned over to this select committee. And Dr. Morens, it appears that you yourself didn't even follow your own guidance. At least that's what I've come to believe here. And you've conflated personal and professional matters on both your official and your personal email accounts. That is correct, isn't it?
I don't exactly know what the word conflated means, but mixed them up. Is that what it means?
Well, you want to take the Fifth Amendment? I mean, you don't seem to remember anything. And I find that amazing. something does not seem right here. It's very unsettling to me and obviously to members of this committee. We believe that every federal grant applicant should have full and fair consideration that's consistent with federal guidelines. And I'm not sure that has occurred. I don't know what to make of this. So let me ask you, since you are under oath, what is it that you want this committee to know about these so many allegations that have been heralded, sent your way?
I want this committee to know that however many mistakes I made and however bad they were, I was trying to do the right thing. I had a friend, a personal friend, who was in danger of being murdered and his family being murdered, and everything centered around that. And I did what I could do, and pretty soon the Gmail thing, which I thought was desirable and legal, getting personal stuff
Sir, you
away
lost
from
me. You lost me. What does a friend of yours who is close to being murdered have to do with the way that you performed your duties?
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question. Could you?
I didn't understand your answer. You said I was dealing with a friend who was close to being murdered, and then you went on to.
Yeah, Kwesi Mfume is he is grilling them, and he's not taking that being all over the place crap. He wants this direct answer.
Say something else. I'm trying to connect them.
Let me just repeat. My reason for telling Peter and others to go to my Gmail is because Peter and later Peter Hotez and some others were under death threats, and anything they sent me on my government email could end up in the public domain, and then I would be responsible for, making their peril even worse. Does that make sense, or can I explain it again?
Hell no.
All right. Let me go back again, what I said before. When Peter Daszak contacted me in early 2020.
This is the reason why I say it should be an age cap when it comes to certain jobs, because the competence goes right along with the memory. And some of these cats just be too old to do these jobs. They too old to function on these jobs. All jobs in government should have an age cap, even like when you're dealing with being a doctor. It should be an age cap. They should not, be forced to retire, but it should be, when you come to that age, it's time to go. This guy can't remember what he did.
And let me know that an email that he had sent me to my government NIH email had ended up being published in a journal or something, and that it was personally embarrassing to him. I said to him, as I said several times to him, why are you sending it on my government email? This is not government business. It's your personal thing about your state of mind, about your security arrangements, that if known, your address being published, if your security arrangements are known, then people trying to kill you could make it, could maybe do it. And I felt responsible for that. So Peter was very upset, and I was upset too.
Well, Dr. Morens, what else do you feel responsible for?
Pardon?
What else do you feel responsible for?
I'm sorry, I'm getting this echo here, and should I turn off my microphone?
Yeah, you're using my time. Let me ask you, why didn't you report any of this to the ethics office?
Good question.
I don't know. I didn't. I don't even know what our ethics office does, but Peter certainly reported. Peter reported it to the.
I'm not worried about Peter. I'm talking.
The ethics office deal with whether or not you are operating in the function of your employment ethically. If you're against the code of ethics or not with your position, he knows.
Talking about you. Peter's not here. I just want to know, if you thought this was ethically incorrect or improper, why didn't you report it to the ethics office?
What are you referring to as what being ethically improper?
Well, you just said you asked him why was he sending this to one email account when it should have gone to another one.
Exactly.
And you're asking me whether I thought what he was doing was unethical? What I was doing is unethical?
This is laughable.
Sir, I think you're going to be haunted by your testimony today. and it's unfortunate. It's all on the record. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to many of us, certainly not to me. And I don't want to carry this on any further, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to yield back any time that I have remaining. I thank you for the opportunity.
Now recognize Mr. Cloud from Texas for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this correct that this was your title?
The last video I'm going to play is about Fauci keeps lying about, you know, his denial of lab leaks. But before I do that, I'm going to do a quick promo, 30-second promo. It is laughable, that guy is.
Get your copy of Fire. It's definitely a must-read. If you enjoy Hood books, this one is it. Just like the title of the book, it's officially Fire. Get it on Amazon, paperback or Kindle.
Robbie, what's on your radar today?
So
Robbie, what's on your radar today?
So former White House coronavirus advisor Anthony Fauci doesn't believe the lab leak explanation of COVID-19's origins is a conspiracy theory. Wow. He admitted that during a closed-door grilling session before the House Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic on Monday. Legislators did not release a transcript of his testimony, but Representative Brad Wenstrup, a Republican from Ohio, who chairs the committee, published some highlights on X. In recent months, Fauci has denied that he ever categorically rejected the possibility that COVID-19 accidentally escaped from a laboratory, but he faces very serious allegations that he deterred scientific experts from considering it. At issue is the proximal origin of SARS-CoV-2, a paper that appeared in Nature Medicine, a scientific journal, in March 2020, the very start of the global pandemic. Fauci was then head of NIAID, the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, and also Francis Collins, then director of the National Institutes of Health, participated in a conference call with the authors of that paper, whose initial openness to a lab leak explanation changed significantly prior to its publication. The paper ultimately ruled out a lab leak as not just unlikely, the phrasing used in an early draft of the paper, but improbable. More recently, Fauci has contended that he always remained open to the idea of a lab leak, but was persuaded by scientific arguments, including those in the proximal origin paper, that zoonotic spillover was more likely. Now, this claim would be more persuasive if Fauci had not stated over and over and over and over again in media interviews that he strongly favored the zoonotic origin theory. His subsequent suggestion that he did not lean in either direction is flatly contradicted by his literal words. Check out this recap from Matt Orfaglia.
If it may have been a lab, may have been nature, we're supposed to look forward, then why did Dr. Fauci work so hard for just one of those theories?
What do you say to that? I'm almost have to laugh at that, Neil. I mean, that's totally bizarre. First of all, I wasn't.
Salute to my brother and comrade, Talk Your Talk Media, Greedy Vegan. Thanks for tapping in, good brother.
Leaning totally strongly one way or the other. I wasn't leaning totally strongly one way or the other.
Flashback. What I do feel strongly about is that this was a spillover from an animal species to a human.
Strongly suggesting that, in fact, it was a natural occurrence.
Very strongly. Strongly indicating that it was a natural spillover.
Strongly points to this being a natural occurrence.
Pointing much more strongly
Pretty strong.
towards a natural occurrence. Very, very strongly. Strongly favors a natural occurrence.
I wasn't leaning totally strongly one way or the other.
It is very, very strongly.
If he's saying very, very strongly with one narrative, but he said he's not leaning very strongly towards no narrative. Incredible.
Leaning towards this could not have been artificially or deliberately manipulated.
He lied and lied. Did he have his thumb on the scale? I don't know. You tell me. Now, it was certainly in Fauci's interest to downplay the possibility that that human experimentation on viruses accidentally unleashed COVID-19 upon the world. During his career, Fauci remained one of the foremost advocates of public funding for gain-of-function research in which scientists manipulate viruses in order to make them deadlier and more transmissible. Fauci and other public health experts have
Salute to my good brother, TSL, my brother, Chris Cyphers. Salute. Thanks for tapping in.
straightforwardly denied that the U.S. funded such research in Wuhan, China, but critics say this is an exercise in semantics. Indeed, EcoHealth Alliance, a U.S. nonprofit that obtained public funding to conduct research on bat coronaviruses in Wuhan, China, was caught actively misleading Pentagon officials about the nature of the experimentation. Peter Daszak, the head of EcoHealth Alliance, advised colleagues to deceive regulators about the fact that the research would be conducted in China under laxer lab safety standards. A group of elite scientists deliberately lied to U.S. security officials in order to spend American tax dollars performing risky experiments under substandard laboratory conditions in a notoriously secretive and authoritarian foreign country. Maybe those experiments created COVID-19 and maybe they didn't. In any case, it's clearly not a conspiracy theory. Good of Fauci to recognize the obvious, however belatedly it might be. Now, one can debate the extent of Fauci's wrongdoing here for certain. It's the mainstream media that really dropped the ball in terms of lab leak discourse, if we're revisiting this topic. Remember that the Washington Post was an early offender accusing Senator Tom Cotton of repeating a coronavirus theory that was already debunked. The article explicitly applied.
They definitely didn't want us, the people, actually talking about this and expressing their concerns about it and telling the truth about what went on and what's going on. They want us silent when it comes to that, of course, after they get their desired effect.
Applied the phrase conspiracy theory to the lab leak idea. Now, the New York Times did the same thing, noting that the lab leak had been dismissed by scientists. In fact, the Times lead coronavirus reporter, Apurva Mandavili, went a step further, calling the lab leak a racist theory. Mandavili's tone.
Salute to my brother Drake Hobbs Music. Salute to you, good brother. Thanks for tapping in.
Toward the lab leak was broadly representative of a whole host of mainstream journalists, media commentators, and so-called fact checkers and misinformation experts. Following this flawed consensus, social media.
That's exactly what they call it. When one of us talk about it, we get charged with misinformation. You can give the correct information, and just because you're not on the mainstream circuit of media, they'll say you're giving misinformation. Well, it's really misinformation, but they call it misinformation.
Sites, including Facebook, brutally suppressed any and all discussion of the lab leak theory on their platforms as recently as August 2023. The Journal of the American Medical Association was still counting lab leak discourse online as evidence of the unstoppable spread of misinformation. And the Global Disinformation Index, a British nonprofit that received funding from the State Department.
That same misinformation that they was trying to stop, they're actually reporting now.
Well, they warned that blaming the pandemic on a lab leak could lead to racist attacks on Asian people. So that's a long way of saying that self-appointed misinformation cops went to great efforts to censor and stigmatize this topic of conversation on grounds that it was either racist or conspiracy or both, yet it's neither. Even Dr. Fauci says so. Now, one might hope that this would prompt some self-reflection within media circles. The anti-misinformation crowd wasn't just wrong, they were militant that it was of vital importance to stop everyone from even contemplating the possibility of a lab leak theory. There's a perniciousness underlying this attitude, and one that clearly threatens free speech, as many U.S. political figures, including people like President Joe Biden and Senator Elizabeth Warren, have decided that the federal government should do more to combat purported misinformation. Now, they might consider whether they themselves have been misinformed. And I just saw a screenshot of a World Economic Forum ranking misinformation and disinformation as the #1 global threat, above even like climate change and extreme weather events.
Wow.
There's a dramatic.
Their propaganda is the only propaganda. Media, multi-ethnic destruction in America, the news, never-ending white supremacy.
Quality to the way misinformation and disinformation is described. And it's like, it's fine to disagree on the origins of COVID-19. We still don't know for sure. I'm not saying that we do. It's fine for people to favor the other explanation and to make the case for that at a time where more of the scientific community was saying that. But so many of the people in the media went a step further and saying that, like, you shouldn't even be able to express opposition to that. There's something wrong with that, and sort of implying and suggesting to politicians' figures that that kind of speech actually ought to be criminalized if possible. And that's what I'm so worried about.
Yeah, I very, very viscerally remember the pushback against covering the possibility of lab leak origin shortly after I started my podcast and started talking about it in the summer of 2021. And it was really stunning how, even in an era where it felt like things were relaxing a little bit, kind of post-vaccine, people were coming out of their houses and the emergency nature of the public temperature seemed to be abating, that there was still such a vehement pushback against people even considering, in the format of a YouTube podcast, the possibility of lab leak origin. And so I think Matt Orfalea did a really amazing job putting together those clips, because some folks really would memory hole the advice that was given at the time. I think it's fine for people to make mistakes, but to hear
Or to change their mind when new evidence emerges.
Sure,
certainly.
But to hear Fauci deny that he ever used language that he specifically used over and over and over and over again, it's the gaslighting that I think has polarized so many people more so than the initial mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, stick around. We'll have more Rising right after this.
I want to thank everybody for joining me this afternoon. I just had to get this information out. And I appreciate everybody for tapping in. My brother Dre Cobb's Music, my brother Big Dog Philly OG, The Smokers Lounge, Chris Cypher, salute to you, good brother. Talk Your Talk Media, my brother and comrade Greedy Vegan, my brother Kill Switch, Lady Shea Butter, the brother Richard Neal Bay, my brother Hawkeye. Greetings. Thanks for tapping in to the sister Sharon Walker. I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody for tapping in. And go to the brother Big Dog Philly's OG's channel. He's going to be going live in a little bit about Steve Harvey telling us that we should vote anyway and forget about reparations. These Negroes who try to be an influence to us need to just shut up. And they're not in our tax brackets. They don't have our problems. But they tell us that we should just vote anyway and forget about reparations, and telling us that we can expect anything if we don't put our confidence in a politician who's on the record for never doing a damn thing for us. That's insanity. That's why we should never allow entertainers, the whole entire umbrella of entertainers, I don't care what they do, they should not be influencing our people. Until next time, this is your brother Nasir, and this is The Enemy's Public. If you haven't, like, share, and subscribe. Peace.